I'm Charlotte. Just a month ago, I managed to get out of my boyfriend's trap. Ex-boyfriend, actually. I'm still reeling from the horror I've been through. And the first thing I found out is that my boyfriend is actually a maniac. I'll tell you about it because I can't keep silent any longer. In the meantime, subscribe and watch other animations. After all, we still have a lot of interesting stories. Anyway, it was winter when we met Benjamin. We ran into him at the ice rink. Everything seemed so romantic. Benj kept me warm with his jacket that night, buying hot coffee while we went for a ride. And in the late afternoon, we went to a dinner and ate burgers, and after that, he didn't walk me home. It was wonderful. I laughed a lot with him, and Benjamin could make jokes. Then he showed up the next day, invited me for a walk, and the next day we went to a movie, to a cafe. Each time he came up with a new occupation. We saw each other every day. And when it didn't work out, he wrote or called. Imperceptibly, feelings grew. I introduced him to my friends, mother, and sister. Even though it hadn't been long since we'd started dating, I felt like I loved him. He made a positive impression on everyone, and I was proud of it. Benj himself was a little older than me. He was the only man in the family, so he earned as much as he could to support the family, his mother and brother. I was struck by his strength of spirit, the optimism that he exuded. Several times he left for work in another city, but never forgot to bring back some souvenir. However, he never told me exactly what he did, and I didn't know where he lived. These things didn't bother me at all, because the main thing was his attitude and love. About 3 months later, Benjamin invited me to spend the weekend with him. He rented a small cottage in the mountains. It was already spring, and the view from there promised to be amazing. I told my mother I was going to Tiffany's to study for my school exam, and I went with him. My girlfriend promised to cover for me. That's why I loved her the most. She told me not to worry about anything and to rest. What could sound better? I quickly packed my bag and ran out of the house. My boyfriend was already waiting for me on the street. We jumped in the car and drove off. Despite the fact that it was raining and it was cool, the mood was good. Spring, after all. A couple of hours later, we arrived at this cottage. It was beautiful, small, incredibly cozy. There were only 4 rooms, and the living room with the fireplace was the largest. It was warm inside, and there were groceries in the kitchen. It turns out that Benjamin had already made supplies for us. I offered to make pasta, but he said that he would do everything himself. Poured me wine, sat me in a chair, covered me with a blanket, and went to cook, while I watched my favorite TV series on my laptop and waited for dinner. From the kitchen floated a delicious smell of something meat. After a couple of hours, Benj called for food, and he cooked chicken in the oven and a salad. After a big dinner, we went out on the porch, but he stood behind me and hugged me, talking about his feelings. I don't think I've ever been happier. It was beautiful. Suddenly his phone rang, and he went into the house. And I wanted to enjoy the cool air, and I stayed. A second later, I heard the sound of a voice. Or I thought I heard it. I started to listen, but it was hard to do because of the rain. The strange thing was that there was nothing else nearby except our house. Voices from the basement? Then someone touched my shoulder sharply from behind, and I screamed and shuddered. It was Benj. "What are you doing? Is everything okay? Can you have enough wine already?" he said, laughing. Then he apologized and said he needed to leave for a couple of hours. His friend had a flat tire in his car, and he was stuck not far from here, and he needed help. I nodded my head and said that everything was fine. I would wait for him here. Benji started the car and drove away. I went inside and poured myself more wine. The empty house didn't look so nice to me now. As soon as I sat back in my chair, the same voices rang out in my head. I tried to distract myself by turning up the volume on the show, but I kept thinking about that voice. Am I being paranoid? Turning off the computer, I lay down on the floor and tapped my fist several times. And I was answered. Oh my God! I knocked again and heard, "Save!" I was terrified. I got up abruptly from the floor and didn't know what to do. Then I heard the blows and pleas for help even more clearly. I was so scared that I wanted to run. I ran out into the street, reached the gate, and stopped. Something made me come back. I knew the sounds were coming from underground. I ran into the backyard and found a door leading to the basement, which was covered with boards. I could barely dig it out, and there was an iron lock on the door. I managed to break it with a crowbar. Then I saw steps leading down. It was damp, dark, and smelly. I turned on the flashlight on my phone and started walking slowly down the stairs. Inside, there were some unnecessary things and nothing else. Then I heard again, "Save!" It turns out there was another room. I opened the door and saw that inside the dim light is sitting some girl. Looking at me, she began to ask for help in a loud voice. My legs gave way from fear and my heart seemed to run into my heels. Somehow intuitively, I ran to her and untied her hands. The girl was unhurt, but very exhausted. She looked at me in the face and told me I had to run away. We held hands, but the door closed abruptly. She screamed, and I realized that Benjamin was back. I asked him to open the door, promising that everything would be kept secret, no one would find out what happened here. I swore. And he just said, "You're right, no one will know what happened here." And the footsteps began to move away. Emily, that's her name, got hysterical and started crying and said that he was going to come with a camera and start hitting us and taking pictures. This was his fetish, and it was the least of the evils that he did with other girls. "He's a real maniac!" screamed Emily. But I wasn't ready to give up, and I wasn't ready to panic. He left out one detail, my phone number. I immediately called the police and gave them my approximate location. Help should be here any minute. Suddenly, we heard the door begin to open slowly. I pressed myself as close to the wall as I could. Benj came down the steps, and I hit him in the back of the head with my phone. He fell, but got up quickly and hit me in the face. Then he started saying that no one would be able to get out of his trap and attacked me again. Amelia jumped on his back, but he deftly turned her over on the ground. I could already hear the dogs barking in the street. The police had arrived. We screamed as hard as we could. Employees quickly broke down the door to the basement. Benjamin did not even have time to think as he was handcuffed. Emily was very scared, and I was also in shock. It turns out that his name was not Benji, and he has recently been wanted in a neighboring town. His weakness is schoolgirls. In general, he is a pedophile with abnormal sadistic tendencies. Now he faces jail. Well, I don't go to the rink anymore. Hey, my name is Monica. I know firsthand what poverty is. We were so poor that we could not afford anything extra. A birthday celebration, for example, with a cake and gifts. But one day, everything changed. Or rather, we changed everything. There are 4 of us in the family: Dad, Mom, brother, and me. My parents worked as teachers, my father at the university, my mother at school. We lived modestly, but as our father said, honestly. He and my mother were very decent people and demanded the same from my brother and me. Dad is convinced that money earned by honest work is much more important than the other way around. We didn't complain, even though we were poor. Sometimes I envied some guys, which have big and beautiful house, dogs, pool in the yard, as have some of my classmates. Each of them had their own room. The girls went shopping. They often called me, but I refused, saying that I was not feeling well. I think they understood the real reason, though they didn't show it. I was very happy that they were all very good guys and did not look at the financial situation. My little brother always asked me what my dream was, and I said I wanted to grow up and get a good job so I could earn a decent living. And I also wanted to send him to a talent show. By the way, did I tell you that my little brother Michael can sing really well? We asked him almost every night to sing us something after dinner. Michael especially loved the classics and always wanted to participate in a talent show. Once he even took a camera from his friend, recorded the video there, and sent it to that program. He passed the selection. He was invited to come to participate, but we were poor, so there was no money for the trip. I was proud of him and wanted to help with all my heart, so I started knitting children's clothes and selling them online, but I didn't have enough money to go half the way. One evening, we all got together again after dinner. Dinner was beans and broccoli again. I hated them. They were rather boring, but they were cheap products and, as my mother liked to say, useful. I watched as we ate small portions, that is, with maximum economy. The table seemed almost empty. Traditionally, after everyone had eaten, Mikey sang us another song. You should have heard him sing sensuously. He closes his eyes and feels the song. Michael always sings with soul, and it was magic. He loved to sing more than anything in the world. My mother said dreamily that if he had been on a talent show, he would have won. After loud applause, the parents discussed the news of the day, told each other funny stories with students, and then Dad said that today one of them did not prepare for an important exam in his subject and could not pass the test. His father sent him for a retake and told him to come back in a week, and the student said that this test was the last, and in a week he had to fly to Europe for a vacation. He said that if he did not pass the exam well, his parents would not let him go on vacation, and this was the dream of his life. I told him to prepare better, and he said, you see, he doesn't have time for this. And then he takes out his wallet and asks, how much? I didn't understand what it was about, and then I saw that he was offering me a bribe. Can you imagine? My father said. Then, according to him, he escorted this insolent student out of the door and told him not to approach him with such a proposal again. Then he began to lament that now students have become quite lazy, that it is easier for them to buy everything with someone else's money. I will say right away, I shared my father's opinion about honest earnings, fully supported their point of view, but today when I looked at our modest dinner in a different way, at my brother who again pleased us with his favorite song, something turned me over. It's like I don't want to put up with what we have anymore. I could feel my anger rising. Maybe at least once in your life you should take a bribe so that at least your son will fulfill his dream and get on with this show, I blurted out to my father. My parents were taken aback by my audacity to say such a thing, and by the fact that such a thing had occurred to me. The indignant father got up from the table and said that he was ashamed of such a daughter. I, of course, burst into tears at these words and went out into the street with a madman, slammed the door, and roared on. At this moment, my classmate Nick was passing by and he asked what was wrong. I didn't want to tell. I was embarrassed to share my problems with someone. Even though we'd been friends since elementary school, I'd never shared anything like this with him. But he sat next to me for a long time until I calmed down, and then finally got me to talk to him. Nick called me stupid for not asking for help and offered to make money by hosting a concert with my brother. Let him use his talent and earn his way to another city and participate in the show, suggested Nick. The idea was quite simple, but we needed the help of other guys to do it. Nick, as promised, took care of everything and classmates also helped. A few days later, a music concert was held at the huge mansion of Nick's cousin, Sarah, to raise funds for Mikey. My generous classmates helped organize a mini stage, make cool lighting, a buffet for guests, and seating. It was like a dream. I couldn't believe it was really happening. Michael, when he heard this news, was very happy. He prepared a whole repertoire for the evening, took his favorite guitar, and went out to sing. I watched the reaction of people. It seems that he managed to involve the guests in his special mood. At the end, everyone gave a standing ovation. Our parents also came there, of course. My father wanted to apologize for the fact that his life principles made the family starve. I will not take dishonest money, but I can give private lessons, thereby earning more, he said and hugged me. My father finally realized that the principles of life are important, but we must not allow people to live only by them, to please themselves and to the detriment of others. That was enough. I was happy. Well, it's been about a month since then. My father and I hurriedly cooked steaks for dinner while I washed fruit and made salad. On this day, we had a special occasion. We were waiting for Mom and Mikey. They were about to arrive from New York. Oh yes, you don't know. Mikey won the talent show.